Some of you who are on Facebook, you might have seen that I was up until 5 in the morning last night working on this speech. And the more I read about Grandmaster Helio's amazing history, the more I want to understand, the more I want to research. And with the internet, and also the fact that Grandmaster Helio was so organized with his archives by documenting and keeping newspaper clippings and articles, everything that came out on him, basically on newspapers, he kept it in a very organized way. He had these big books where he glued every article. He would cut the article and glue it on these books. And so in the end, he had about 5 books, this thick, this tall. And I remember when I was a kid, I would go to his home in the mountains and I would read these books. And I was always fascinated with the history. And for this ceremony, I spent a lot of time researching, because we can all talk about how great Grandmaster Helio was, but I think that goes without saying. We don't say it only at his 100th birthday celebration. We say it every day. Anybody who trains with us knows how much we praise, how much we're grateful, how much we're loyal to the Grandmaster. So I thought it would be nice to give you guys some historical perspective and to talk a little bit about his first 10 fights, because his fights from the 1950s are the ones that people know the most. The Kimura fight in 1951, and the one before that against Yukio Kato, the one that is on YouTube. You can watch it on YouTube, where he choked him. You also have the Valdemar Santana, the longest fight in history, 3 hours and 45 minutes, uninterrupted. But not too many people know and speak about his first fights. So I would like to talk about his first 10 fights and the beginning of his career when he became famous in Brazil. He was born in the north in 1913, and his first fight took place on January 16th, 1932. So he was 18 years old. And one thing to mention, which is true to all his fights, is that he never accepted to fight in any match with points or judge's decision. In his philosophy, there was only one way to decide a winner in a fight. Or actually, I should say 2 ways. Submission, meaning somebody surrenders, or knockout, meaning somebody is passed out from a choke, from a strike, depending on the rules, depending on what happens. But he never accepted that anyone else other than the fighters decided the outcome of the fight. That was something that was very important to him and his brother, Grandmaster Carlos Gracie. So on January 16th, 1932, he had his first match against Antonio Portugal. He was a welterweight boxing champion in Brazil, very experienced boxer in Brazil. He weighed 147 pounds, and what's interesting about that match is that Antonio decided to wear gloves, and he wore 4-ounce gloves. And I understand that the UFC gloves are also 4 ounces, so that's what he fought with. And Grandmaster Helio fought with his kimono. The fight was scheduled for 6 3-minute rounds, but short rounds. But, and I think that was something that the boxer requested. And for that fight, Grandmaster Carlos Gracie, who was Grandmaster Helio's manager, accepted. That was an event that was organized to get funds for the Brazilian Olympic team, who would go to the LA Games in Los Angeles in 1932. That's when the LA Coliseum was built. So in January, Grandmaster Helio fought and won very quickly. In under 1 minute, he blocked the punch, he took him down, and he applied an arm lock. What was interesting about that match is that he always told us the story that as he was walking up to the ring, he wanted to say something. He wanted to say a few words to his brother Carlos, but the words would not come out, given his anxiety and how much adrenaline was flowing through his veins. And for that reason, he said that he didn't say the words and he just went and fought, and the result was great, and that was his first fight. Was a Jiu-Jitsu match against a Japanese opponent who was a black belt from Japan called Takashi Namiki. That was the first time in Rio that you were going to have a Jiu-Jitsu match, meaning Jiu-Jitsu versus Jiu-Jitsu. And the Japanese did not like to fight with strikes, so it was pure grappling. It was scheduled for 8 5-minute rounds, and it ended up in a draw. During the match, Grandmaster Helio secured an arm lock. He said he heard Namiki's arm pop a few times, but Namiki did not surrender, and he was very impressed with Namiki's resistance. On November 5th, 1932, we had Grandmaster Helio's fight against Fred Ebert. He was a German-American catch wrestler, heavyweight, weighing 192 pounds. Fred Ebert was very famous for having fought against Jim Londos, who was the world catch wrestling champion, to a draw. It was a 2-hour match. And Fred Ebert fought against Grandmaster Helio in 1932. Grandmaster Helio had just turned 19. And he had a huge abscess, an anthrax, it's called, on his neck. And the doctors wanted to cancel the fight at the event. When they examined him and they saw this abscess, this anthrax on his neck, they wanted to cancel the fight. And Carlos Gracie said, I think if you cancel this fight, there are going to be riots. And so they decided not to cancel the fight, to allow him to fight. And this fight was scheduled for 10-minute rounds with no limit in rounds. So it was supposed to go until somebody either submitted or was knocked out. In this match, Grandmaster Helio used many striking techniques, given that Fred Ebert was a wrestler, especially palm strikes, elbow strikes, and knee strikes. In fact, he used to tell me that his elbows were black and blue, both elbows, after the fight, for having hit Fred Ebert in the face so many times. At one point, Fred Ebert tried to throw Grandmaster Helio out of the ring to try to knock him out by landing on top of him on the concrete floor. Grandmaster Helio noticed it, sat down, did a tomoe-nage, and threw him over. He flew by himself over the ropes and landed by himself outside the ring. Finally, in the 11th round, 1 hour and 45 minutes into the match, the police decided to stop it. Because they felt that it was a massacre. It was too much blood, it was too violent, Fred Ebert was getting beat up and not fighting back. And so they decided to stop the fight. But the contract was very strict in saying that a winner could only be decided if there was submission or knockout. So, and the fight was, the purse was only to the winner. The loser would not make any money, so they decided to call it a draw and split the purse. And in the locker room, Fred Ebert said this about Grandmaster Helio, and that's something that I wrote down because I think it would be interesting for us to hear about Grandmaster Helio from the eyes of his opponents after their fights against him. And this is what Fred Ebert said in the locker room right after the fight. Helio is a tough and brave young man. In the first round, I tried to find out what he knew, and what I observed was a great surprise to me. I don't know what the kid knows, but everything he does extremely well. He is a master of defense. I realized early in the fight that it would be almost impossible to overcome his defense. I don't think any fighter in Brazil could have resisted the scissor choke that I applied on him in the 5th round, but he resisted. So this was the fight against Fred Ebert, and this fight made Grandmaster Helio a celebrity in Brazil for beating this big and strong American wrestler who outweighed him by 30 pounds. Then in 1933, Grandmaster Helio had a motorcycle accident, and he could not fight in the year of 1933. It was a very serious accident. They almost amputated his leg. If it wasn't for his brother, they would have amputated his leg. But the leg got better, and on June 23rd, 1934, after over 1 year of inactivity, Grandmaster Helio was back against a very famous Japanese Jiu-Jitsu black belt called Taro Miyake, who had fought around the world with great success. This match was no rounds, no time limit. The fight began. Taro Miyake applied the throwing technique. Grandmaster Helio immediately put him in the guard. They stayed for 22 minutes in the guard. Taro was inside Grandmaster Helio's guard and could not pass. At the 22-minute mark, Grandmaster Helio swept him and mounted. He took his time, controlled the position, and in minute 26, he applied a front choke from the mount and started to apply pressure. Taro Miyake had said earlier that he couldn't be choked. He actually would do demonstrations where he would tie a rope around his neck and he would have 2 people pull from each side, and just with the resistance, he would be able to resist. And he said that he could not be choked. So early in the fight, Grandmaster Helio applied the choke, but felt that he was resistant and said, I'm not going to waste my energy, and allowed for the fight to continue. And then when he was mounted in the 26th minute, he did it again after Miyake was tired. And Miyake tried to resist, but he went to sleep. Grandmaster Helio told the referee, Miyake's sleeping. The referee said continue because he didn't tap. Grandmaster Helio Grandmaster Helio continued a little more just to make sure. But then he let go and he told the referee, you want me to kill this guy? And he stood up. And Taro Miyake apparently took a while to come back. But he did come back. And in the locker room he said, I admired in Helio Gracie his courage and the resolve through which he pursued the victory. His guard is one of the best I've ever seen. I just could not pass it. On July 28th, 1934, a month later, he fought Wladek Zbyszko, one of the best wrestlers ever. Polish wrestler, 220 pounds. Grandmaster Helio, by the way, in his whole career, he fluctuated between 135 and 145. So Wladek was 220. Imagine, if you think of the fighters in the Brazilian champion, José Aldo, that's 155. So 10 pounds less than that. So, or 20 pounds less than that. Imagine them fighting the heavyweights. That's what Grandmaster Helio was doing. This is unparalleled, unprecedented. So, this is what Zbyszko said after the match. There is no doubt about the valor of Helio Gracie. I was very impressed during the fight that he remained composed and maintained good control of all my movements, never leaving an opening. I tirelessly looked for an opening, but his defense was unbelievable. I tried to submit him, but I could not find any openings. At his weight, if he wasn't a phenomenal technician, I would have beat him. If he moved to Europe or to America, he would have a brilliant career as a fighter. If he had followed Zbyszko's advice, history would have been quite different. And on February 2nd, 1935, Grandmaster Helio had his most violent fight against a Brazilian fighter, the Brazilian wrestling champion, called Dudu. That was his nickname. His weight was 187 pounds, and the fight was scheduled for 5 20-minute rounds. This fight started standing up. Dudu took Grandmaster Helio to the ground and stayed inside Grandmaster Helio's guard for about 15 minutes. There was a very violent exchange. Dudu broke Grandmaster Helio's nose with a headbutt. Grandmaster Helio hit Dudu a lot from the bottom. And finally, the both of them stood up. The fight went back to the feet. Grandmaster Helio, who had very good striking techniques, threw a high kick to Dudu's face, and Dudu spit 2 of his teeth from that kick. Then the second one, he faked like he was going to throw the high kick again. Dudu raised his defense to cover up, and he threw a side kick to his spleen, which broke his rib and forced Dudu to surrender and submit, and he won that fight via side kick to the spleen, which I think was from the description, very similar to the one that John Jones used to knock down, not knock out, but knock down Vitor Belfort in their in a recent UFC match. This is what Dudu said after the match. Many people were surprised that I took him down to the ground, but that is my specialty as a wrestler. I tried to strike him from inside his guard, but he was able to defend and hit me with very precise strikes from the bottom. I didn't feel those immediately, but later they slowly affected my stamina. His side kick to my spleen made it impossible for me to breathe and therefore continue fighting. I always considered Helio to be a good fighter, but I did not know his extreme courage and combative efficiency. On December 5th, 1935, Grandmaster Helio would face his toughest opponent from that generation, from his first 10 fights. That was Yasuichi Ono, somebody who came from Japan to establish Jiu-Jitsu in Brazil. And according to Grandmaster Helio, he was specifically sent to defeat Grandmaster Helio. He was one of the best in Japan at Grandmaster Helio's weight division, if not the best, an amazing Jiu-Jitsu practitioner. And their first fight happened on December 5th, 1935. It was scheduled for five 20-minute rounds. 5 20-minute rounds. And the fight went the distance. Grandmaster Helio said that was the toughest match he's ever had. He felt like he was in a blender during the first 3 rounds. He didn't even know where he was. In the 4th round, he started gaining back his consciousness as he didn't lose his consciousness, but his ability to see what was happening and fight back. And in the last round, he caught Ono in a choke and almost was able to finish him. Apparently, as the round ended, Ono was very dizzy as he walked back to his corner, saved by the bell. And this is what Ono said. And Ono was very arrogant. There was a lot of pre-fight drama going on in the newspapers back then. I wish I had more time to go over all of that because it's very interesting. But Ono said this after the match. The 2 things that impressed me the most were his courage and his defensive game on the ground. However, if my knees were not hurt, I would have submitted him in the first round via arm lock. And he did. Indeed, he almost caught Grandmaster Helio in arm lock. He had the arm straight. And Grandmaster Helio said after the fight, he would break my arm, but I would not tap. And he didn't, and he escaped. Ono was not able to break his arm, and he attributed that to the fact that his knees were hurt. On June 13, 1936, Grandmaster Helio fought Takeo Yano. And that was a very interesting match because there was a huge rivalry between Yano and the Gracies because they both applied to teach self-defense, hand-to-hand combat to the Brazilian Navy. And Yano won the contract, even though he was Japanese. And a lot of the newspapers at the time were very angry at that, thinking that they should give the contract to a Brazilian, especially the Gracies who had done so much. But the Brazilian Navy decided to hire Yano as the hand-to-hand combat instructor for the Brazilian Navy. And I think Grandmaster Helio in that match wanted to prove a point by defeating Yano. It was scheduled for 3 20-minute rounds, and Grandmaster Helio almost choked him in the first round, but Yano was saved by the bell. And in the last 2 rounds, Yano basically ran away the whole fight. Grandmaster Helio, telling us a story, said he would actually run away, run around the ring to avoid me, and I was not able to submit him. On September 12, 1936, Grandmaster Helio faced who was at the time, until then, the biggest Japanese that he had fought at 175 pounds. Masagoshi was his name. He had been a sumo wrestler in Japan and a black belt in judo. And he came in with an interesting strategy. He knew about Grandmaster Helio's famous choke. So he came in determined not to get choked. And when the fight went to the ground, he turned his back. There were no strikes allowed. And he, like judo guys do today, he crossed his arms and he really did not let Grandmaster Helio choke as he attacked and attacked and attacked. And finally, he stood up. And when he stood up, Grandmaster Helio was able to throw him. And this time, Masagoshi started protecting his neck, not knowing that Grandmaster Helio also had a great arm lock. And Grandmaster Helio arm locked him and won the fight via arm lock. He said, that was the one Japanese who I couldn't choke. I had to arm lock him, but he won nonetheless. And his 10th fight, the last one that I'm going to talk about today, was a rematch against Ono, the one who said that he didn't win in the first round because of his knees. And both of them really prepared themselves because they respected each other and they both wanted to win this match very badly. It was once again scheduled for 5 20-minute rounds. And once again, it went the distance. And it was a back and forth match, and Grandmaster Helio said that in this match he felt much better. And this was what Ono had to say after the match. Helio Gracie was extremely resourceful. I must pay tribute to his extraordinary valor as a Jiu-Jitsu practitioner, because I used all my Jiu-Jitsu skills in trying to defeat him. However, Helio has a formidable guard. I never faced a man in my life with such great defensive skills. In this fight, Helio especially surprised me with his ability to defend my throwing techniques. I decided to try to tire him out and only start attacking in the 3rd round. However, his unbeatable guard destroyed my plan. And this was a great tribute to Grandmaster Helio coming from Ono. And one thing that you must understand is that at the time, Jiu-Jitsu was very new in Brazil. And the Japanese had had this art for centuries. And they considered themselves to be the only ones who knew Jiu-Jitsu. And no one in the world could actually defeat them or even resist them. And for this person in Brazil to go against the best and not lose and beat some of their best fighters was really something that shocked them and really was one of the factors that contributed for the success of Jiu-Jitsu in Brazil and subsequently around the world. In closing, I would like to say one thing about the Kimura match, something that I think is very unfair, that if you go to Wikipedia and many other sites on the internet, it's written that Kimura broke Grandmaster Helio's arm. And I think if he had, it would have been something even good for Grandmaster Helio, his ability to resist and his valor in not tapping and trying to fight until the end to resist. But the truth needs to be said. Kimura did not break his arm. And there's plenty of proof of this, including a picture that was taken in the locker room right after the fight where Grandmaster Helio is in the shower. And you can see him with his left arm, which was the one that Kimura applied the Kimura lock. It's on his head like this, under the shower. And we have the statement of Grandmaster Helio after the match, indeed saying that his forearm was sore. And there's a picture of him the day after the fight, no cast. And he said, my forearm is sore because, not from the last application of the move, but because Kimura insisted in the same technique over and over and over, but it was not broken. And in Wikipedia even describes that the ulna bone and the radius bone were both fractured. So it's somebody who is anti-Grandmaster Helio going on Wikipedia. And because I've tried to edit it several times and they keep coming back. So I ask for all of your help, not just all of you here, but all of you who are watching this. To reestablish the truth on Wikipedia and on the internet, because even though Kimura wrote a book in the 70s or 80s, 70s or 80s, saying that he broke Grandmaster Helio's arm, I think that when he wrote that book, he never knew that the Gracies were going to become so famous, that Grandmaster Helio was going to become so famous, and that this would get back and come back to haunt his book. So if he wrote that, indeed, I never actually read it in Japanese, but if indeed he wrote that, it was not true. And the truth must be said and must be told. And one thing that you heard in the two speeches, a common theme of all of Grandmaster Helio's opponents, was that they talked about his defense, which is something unique, and I think Grandmaster Helio is a pioneer, somebody who invented a new system of defense in Jiu-Jitsu, and he deserves credit for that. And his courage, which is unparalleled in his belief in Jiu-Jitsu and his willingness to put himself on the line to prove Jiu-Jitsu's effectiveness, given his light weight. And in closing, I would like to thank all of you for coming. This is a very special day for Jiu-Jitsu. This is a very special day for Valente Brothers. And it's a true honor to see so many people, so many friends, and to have all of you here united, celebrating Grandmaster Helio's amazing legacy and amazing life. Thank you very much.